Hi, it's Lorenzo here. Welcome back to KSP Next, episode 30, where we attempt to get Catherine Brooks, first woman on the moon, back to Earth. As we left the last episode, the lander is on the moon, the derelict ship is in a low orbit, and the rescue ship is in a high orbit. Now, here we are on the surface. I posed a question to you in the comments, like how would you get back? To quickly recap the situation, the descent module had one ignition left. The Ascent module has 10 ignitions and the rescue ship has only 3. Now, one of you commented use the Delta V in the descent stage. Should leave you with plenty of Delta V and ignitions in the Ascent stage to do a rendezvous, and then it's easy to get back to Earth. Turns out that's almost what I did. I was not confident that the Delta V by the descent stage and the Ascent stage together had enough for a rendezvous, because even though there was a fair few 100 meters per second of Delta V in the descent stage, the thrust to weight is fairly low, so we are losing quite a bit of that to gravity drag. And additionally, a 4000 by 4000 orbit is really high, so I didn't do the calculations, but I wasn't confident that this ascent stage would be able to get that, and I wouldn't want to have it stranded and not quite make the rendezvous, and then have to expend ignitions on the rescue ship, because that only has 3. So really can't do a rendezvous burn, a approach burn, a slowing down burn. That's 3 already. So that wasn't an option in my book. What I ended up opting for was to put the Ascent module, as we're getting into now, at just about 30 kilometers and 400 meters per second. And we have about 2000 meters per second of velocity left. What I opted to do is to just lob this thing basically straight up at the approaching rescue ship. Accelerate the burn. It's not very exciting because there is no visible plume. Blame some mod somewhere somehow for that. Doesn't really matter anyway. We're basically still thrusting straight up, and you can see how high that escape ship is. And then the plan is to expend one charge of the rescue ship, and I have to stop myself here and apologize for my sickly sounding voice. That's the simple reason is that I'm a little bit sick, but you'll have to deal with that. Anyway, we're going to throw one ignition into a rendezvous burn from the rescue ship, and then hopefully expend the last bit of Delta V from the Ascent stage to actually match course there, and then have a workable situation. Here we see me trying to plot with the Ascent stage a close encounter, which works out fairly well actually. There we go, just a few kilometers separation. And that's 900 meters per second to go. We've got 1400 left, so that's a comfortable margin. There will still be the matter of a relative velocity of about, well, what is it, 760 meters per second. So that's obviously not in the tanks of the Ascent module, but that's okay because the rescue ship does have ignitions, just not so very many. Let's have a look at how that goes. This is at the end of this burn. We are now on that intercept trajectory, and that makes it, with a small fine tune to go. There we go. That makes it time to switch to that escape ship. See if we have a radio link to it, can control it. All that works out well. That's the advantage of a high orbit. That's part of the reason why I put it there. And all we have to do now is basically warp towards that intercept and make the relative velocity as near to 0 as makes no difference. There we are. You can see on the navel there's no maneuver node, but the target relative speed is about 760 meters per second. Now this ship has 4200 meters per second of Delta V. That's a lot. That's way more than is required. It's just the slight problem of only having 3 ignitions to work with that made this a little bit of a puzzle of orbital mechanics. Also, it's quite heavy still, 25 tons, so the RCS took a little while to do the allage burn. Here we are going, zeroing out that relative velocity anyhow. you can see the vessel doesn't accelerate very quickly because it's quite heavy. It's full of fuel and delta V. There we go. We can see the Ascent module in the distance. Here at the end of that burn, actually about halfway through, I figure, well, I can zero out the relative velocity, but I can also make my ship fly towards the Ascent module after doing that. The only problem is, of course, I have to do that during the burn without throttling, so there's a little bit of back and forth. Reminds me of that scene in Apollo 13 where they try to steer the module by the window. Well, we have all the navigation information we need, we just have to get it right in one go. Because, well, we are gonna be on a suborbital trajectory, granted one that will take about 1.5 hours to crash into the moon, but we are sacrificing a little bit of flexibility in positions where we can do burns, because obviously we won't be in orbit forever. Anyway, it works out. The relative velocity is now 150 meters per second on a straight vector towards the Ascent module, and if you recall, the Ascent module had about 400 meters per second left, and we are now going to approach to within less than a kilometer, so that's exactly what we need. And as the Ascent module has enough delta V to zero this out, we're golden. This thing can just go ahead and do the rendezvous now. You see, relative velocity is 200 or 250 meters per second, and delta V remaining is even 600. So we are comfortably able to make this rendezvous happen. Speeding up the footage again because I do want to show you, but it does get quite boring otherwise, because there's just a sequence of burns. Now this thing has about 6 ignitions left, so there's a fair amount of margin, and then all that there's left to do for Catherine is to grab the rock samples, the other science experiments, and head outside and EVA on over to the rescue ship, really. So what could possibly go wrong there, you ask? Well, surprising things. But first, let's approach the ship. There's a little bit of fuel left in the tanks even, and this is a very, very neat rendezvous. Forgetting the fact that we're technically plummeting to our deaths, but that will take a long time. Oh, look at that. EVA somehow get ejected by, well, let's say the last bit of atmospheric pressure inside the cabin. A little bit too hasty on the airlock. Problem is, she didn't get the science now. That's a bummer, because those rocks, they're really waiting for them back on the surface. Well, trying to grab them from the spinning Ascent module wasn't a resounding success anyhow. And right about at this point is when Catherine realizes, like, oh yeah, we're at 4,500 kilometers, but we are technically falling straight down. Maybe, well, still up, but you know what I mean. We're on a suborbital trajectory that's not stable, and there's technically no infinite time to mess with this. Look at that, how high we are. Anyway, second attempt done. We didn't get the science, but we are right next to a rescue ship that will take us back to Earth. It's about time too, so let's just go to that. We'll collect those rocks some other day, unfortunately. There we go, approaching the Lunatic X. That's the lunar mission. I don't know what the X is for. It wasn't the 10th one, but maybe just the next generation or something. And then the E for emergency, or extra, or some other fun word with an E. Anyway, there we go. Small, tidy little vessel, antennae blazing, and full of rocket fuel, just waiting for us to go home. So now here we have 3 kilometers per second of delta V left, 2 ignitions, so still plenty of delta V, that is. Still have to be a little bit careful to not do something stupid and get stranded. Now, while it's probably technically possible to make 1 burn, we had the 2 ignitions, so what I'm going to do is just make an orbit around the moon. Actually, not an orbit around the moon, but an escape course away from the moon, and then hopefully in 1 burn we can get a nice periapsis at Earth. We're about 1 kilometer per second into this burn, so we were probably couldn't have made the rendezvous with the Ascent stage, what I'm trying to say, delta V wise. But for some reason the batched conics aren't showing up for me, so it is going to be 2 burns. Leave it at this one and time warp to the Earth's sphere of influence, and then we have 1 ignition left to just do the the retrograde burn that will plunge us into the atmosphere, which is happening right now. Last ignition, still way more delta V than we need, but now we're just going to fly by the seat of our pants, point it straight retrograde, and burn until the periapsis is within the atmosphere. Now what I could do is make it a very nice, soft, gentle 50-60 kilometer-ish re-entry, but as this is our last burn, I'm going to make damn sure that any errant RCS burns or decoupler impulses aren't going to put my capsule outside the atmosphere. So I'm going to put it at minus 100 kilometers. It will be possibly a little bit rougher on Catherine, but with the lifting body shape of the capsule, we will be able to steer through the re-entry. Remember, if you look at the nav ball, if the blue bit is pointing up, then the lifting body is generating lift upwards, which will shallow up the trajectory. And if the brown bit, the Earth, is pointing up, then it's generating lift downwards, steepening the trajectory. And I can control this, of course, by rotating the capsule. This is what you will see happen during the descent. And if you're interested in exactly what I'm doing, look at the bottom left screen. The surface information is the right one of the two panels on the bottom left. Especially pay attention to the vertical speed and the altitude. You will see that we are now at 80 kilometers, so well inside the atmosphere. I know that we're coming in fairly steep. A vertical speed of minus 1 kilometer per second or more I find scary, because that tends to change the situation really fast. So I'm now in maximum lift mode. I want to reduce this vertical speed and get this descent under control. You can see the G's are rising fast. We're at 60 kilometers of altitude now, and our horizontal speed hasn't decreased that much more. So it's going really high, like over 15. But the lifting force has taken over, and we're now actually rising again. We're at 200 meters per second vertical, and that's bringing those G forces right back down. And if we were to keep going down, Catherine would have certainly perished of G forces. We're going up at 200 meters per second, 250 meters per second, so we're back at almost 60 kilometers of altitude, and our apoapsis is we're not in an orbital speed anymore. We did lose enough for that. So you can see now I'm putting it sideways so that we are, well, our inclination is changing, but that's not so relevant. We're just letting gravity do its thing relative to the vertical speed, and we still have a few kilometers per second of speed to scrub. So let's do that gently, and you see now that we dip back down below the 50 kilometer mark. There's some firing and there's some G forces again, and this is fairly reminiscent of the actual lunar entries. They didn't take the G forces up quite as high, but they went in first, then skipped up a little bit, and then down for a second pass, and then onto the surface. So I'm very pleased that this is actually possible in the game. It's fun to steer. It's quite fun to steer a re-entry using the lifting body like that. Anyway, this is right about it. We are subsonic thereabouts, so it's all possible surprises have basically not happened, apart from the limited ignitions showing their ugly head last episode, where it's about time to deploy the parachutes, which we did, and jettison the heat shield for a slightly softer landing, and then in the dark come down to the surface in the ocean, where Catherine can await pickup and rehabilitation at the Kerbal Space Center. Now, for the next episode, I am going to do a quick state of the program thing. I've been playing my ass off, really. There's quite a bit of footage and missions that are going to be coming up in the future as I get time to edit and narrate them. Anyway, for now, enjoy the rest of your weekend. We got a lot of money for the crewed lunar landing, so that's an objective achieved there. Bim bam boom. Well done, everyone. And I'll see you guys next time. Yeah, thanks for watching.